Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Israel Hawkins. Starting our coverage off today is a dock strike in Los Angeles, which is starting to gain attention. Now, Larry McGee has our report. Larry, the initial size of this strike was reported to be small, but now there are reports that it's starting to grow in size. What are the details?
It seems to be exactly as you've been hearing, guys. And the strike, which began with just 70 union workers, has now increased to 800, with 10,000 additional workers refusing to cross the picket line. That has brought the Los Angeles dock to an almost complete standstill. Geraldine Natz, who manages the Los Angeles port, says that over $1 billion worth of merchandise passes through the dock per day, and its commerce provides direct employment for over 900,000 workers in the Southlands. At present, the port is backed up, with 16 ships waiting to be unloaded, and 6 additional ships are parked off the coastline. If ships aren't working, and the truckers aren't working, and warehouse workers aren't working, and so goes the ripple effect as described by Ms. Natz. It doesn't take much to affect the supply chain, she says. And altercations like what we are seeing at the Los Angeles port could very easily translate into a difference in what consumers see on the shelves. The unionists, who command an average salary of over $85,000, say that they are losing employment to outsourcing, and it is beginning to impact them. The shipping companies, however, have a different story. According to them, the conflict has little to do with outsourcing. The question now, as the standoff continues, is whether or not we will see a repeat of 2002, when the Bush administration was forced to intervene in port politics and return to the public the services which corporate indignation and unionist greed simply would not. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Baton Jeff. Back to you.
Interesting. It's probably going to affect prices here pretty soon. Now, in other news, 2 powerful car bombs killed 54 and injured 120 in Jaramana, Syria. Jaramana is a tight-knit community of religious minority groups who are traditional supporters of President Bashar al-Assad. After the huge explosions, local people immediately pitched in to repair the damage to shops and homes and to comfort the families of the victims.
One mother lost her 21-year-old son, a medical student, who went to investigate after the first bomb blew up and minutes later was killed by the second bomb. Now, one local businessman was questioned by a reporter as to what was on his jacket. He replied, "It's the blood of the people." He had helped carry the wounded to safety. When asked who attacked their city, he said, "I don't know, I don't know."
Everyone is being careful on placing blame for these bombings because, of course, any kind of accusation could bring about ideas of revenge. Before the war, tolerance of Christians, Muslims, and other faiths was high in Syria. Now the war has put that at risk. A bombing like this can stir up vicious rounds of retaliation.
Now, Syria's Minister for National Reconciliation, Ali Haider, admits that hundreds of attacks have been designed to spark religious conflict. Most people in Syria want the violence to stop so they can resume their normal lives. However, right now, Katan, that prospect looks increasingly remote.
Yeah. Also in Syria, an army helicopter was shot down by those in opposition to President Bashar al-Assad. Raw video shows what appears to be a rebel missile hitting one of the helicopters. Take a look at this. Now, some of these missiles were looted from the military's own bases in previous fighting. With these recent events in civil war, Syria or the end of this civil war in Syria has no end in sight.
Now, from the fighting and unrest in Syria to the fighting and unrest in Egypt, only a week after President Mohamed Morsi gave himself broad new powers that some Egyptians say make him a dictator in all but name, his Islamist allies have rushed to make a final draft of the country's new constitution, which could be voted on before the end of the year.
Some parliament members are crying foul, and it's sparking another day of protests against President Mohamed Morsi. The president defended his increased power last night on Egyptian state television. He said his new authority is needed to guide Egypt through its democratic transition and that he'll give up his expanded powers once the country has a new constitution.
A final draft of the new constitution is now complete, written and voted on by a panel dominated by President Morsi's political allies, nearly all of them Islamist. Now, President Morsi's opponents say that the people who wrote and drafted the constitution do not represent all the sectors of the Egyptian society and doesn't guarantee women's equality. Now, they also claim that this new constitution could be used to curtail freedom of expression.
President Morsi's opponents are therefore planning another big demonstration on Tahrir Square in central Cairo. They say Mr. Morsi is making a political gamble that most people will vote for a constitution that represents his own more conservative views, but by doing so, he's infuriating many other Egyptians.
Now, something that's been in the works for quite a few years, the United Nations voted overwhelmingly to recognize the Palestinian territories as a state, something Palestinians have sought for generations, but a diplomatic setback for the U.S. and Israel. The territories on the west bank of the Jordan River and along the Gaza Strip are home to the Palestinians displaced by the war that created Israel in 1948.
Now, the vote doesn't create an independent Palestine. That would have to come with negotiations with Israel. The Palestinian Authority has become the second non-member state designated by the United Nations. The other one, of course, is the Vatican. The Palestinians are viewing this elevation of status as a historic step to have any kind of recognition of statehood.
Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, who was also the first Palestinian prime minister, rejected last-minute appeals by the United States to reconsider this push for the recognition and stated that the United Nations General Assembly was being called upon to issue a birth certificate of the reality of the state of Palestine. Now, this is not full status as a United Nations member status. That would require the approval of the UN Security Council, and the U.S. has already promised to veto that. Now, U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton called this vote counterproductive and places further obstacles in the path of peace.
Benjamin Netanyahu, in response to this recent decision by the United Nations, stated that Israel is prepared to live in peace with the Palestinian state as long as Israel's security is protected, saying the Palestinians must recognize the Jewish state and they must be prepared to end the conflict with Israel once and for all. Now, he further stated that none of these interests are being set forth in the resolution that went before the UN General Assembly, and that's why Israel cannot accept it.
Now, continuing, Netanyahu said the only way to achieve peace is through agreements reached by the parties directly and not through UN resolutions that completely ignore Israel's vital security. He called the resolution one-sided and stated that it doesn't advance peace, rather it pushes it backwards. His message to the UN General Assembly was that despite any decision made, nothing will break the 4,000-year-old bond between the people of Israel and the land of Israel.
So, on another note, Jeff, the question, how many glasses can you fill with 5 trillion tons of ice?
Wow, well, quite a few, definitely.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, scientists have come out with a recent study showing that nearly that much ice is being melted in Antarctica and Greenland. And that's how much those two areas have lost since 1992, causing sea levels to rise by nearly a half an inch. NASA's Eric Ivan, who worked on the study, wasn't expecting to see such a drastic speed up, which they say is caused by human activity, which of course is warming the atmosphere. 2012 had one of the longest melt seasons they've ever seen.
Now, melting ice sheets now account for 30% of rising sea levels, making flooding from storms like Hurricane Sandy even more destructive. Along the Californian coast, the ocean is expected to rise another 3 to 5 feet by the end of the century, endangering 3.5 million Californians who live near the shore. Malibu beaches have lost 5 to 6 feet of sand in recent years due to stronger storms and, of course, the higher tides.
Residents are even taking steps to protect their homes as the reality of rising sea levels start to sink in. Even the California Coastal Commission is urging cities to have a plan in place to deal with these rising sea levels. Very serious threat.
Well, that's all for us here at YPN News. If you would like to learn more about these and other future prophecies, request a copy of our free monthly newsletter or Prophetic Word magazine.
You can write the House of Yahweh at P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604, or you can call them at 1-800-613-9494. And of course, all calls outside the United States, please dial the number on your screen.
Don't go anywhere. Up next is Yoshua Hawkins explaining Bible prophecies. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.